You know when somebody's coming from here as opposed to coming from here toward you with whatever they're imparting. And
to come from here requires transparency, vulnerability, authenticity. That's the only thing that can come from here.
Hello and welcome to my podcast, Show Up. My name is Daryl Dittmer. As someone who built financial freedom from scratch, I understand what's possible, as there was a time when I thought I had only a life of mediocrity ahead of me. Drinking, drugs, and zero confidence plagued me. The one thing that changed my life is when I decided to do things differently and give success a chance. And I don't just mean financial success, I mean life success. I started to show up to my life and my career, and one step after another provided me the life I never thought possible. At any age, life begins to change when you start to show up. Welcome to my podcast.
Today I'm joined by Scott Lackey. Scott is a husband and dad, patented inventor, Army combat veteran, Ironman athlete, author, speaker, actor, columnist, and business change agent. His first business began at 13 years old, and he has not stopped since. As Scott succinctly explains, every season of business, invention, loss, rebuilding, endurance, and faith became part of my training. Not for success, for formation. Welcome, Scott. So great to have you on today.
Daryl, thank you for that scoreboard introduction there, sir. I appreciate it. And but you started with the most important thing, my family, and thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I saw, I was reading all these things on your website. I'm like, man, this dude's done a lot of stuff. And but then I saw the husband and dad. I'm like, well, that's got to go number one because that's really the important stuff.
No, it is number one. I actually say this in some of my speeches that you can keep all the other stuff as long as I've got my family. You can keep the other part.
Right on, man. I 100% feel the same way. Everything else is secondary and entertaining and fun and sometimes challenging, sometimes crazy, but so is the family stuff from time to time.
Yeah.
However, I will put up with that all day, every day for the rest of my life and absolutely love every minute of it.
That's the crazy stuff we'll take.
Right, exactly. And I want to say thank you so much for your service.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's so important. And my dad was in the Navy and I have a huge amount of respect for those who serve. So thank you.
I appreciate it. Well, even the feeling is mutual for me. There are people that have done a lot more than I have, and I love talking to them and hearing their stories. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. So I looked at a whole bunch of stuff and all of your experience and all of the things you've done. And before I ask the question, because this really struck me when you mentioned that that every season of business, invention, loss, rebuilding, endurance, and faith became part of my training, not for success, for formation. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that rolls?
Yes, and again, I'm glad we're leading with that question because it really is foundationally, it speaks to who I am as a human being today, not who I was, but who I am, how I learned to do that. It was a journey. It wasn't a moment, where I had an epiphany and, I became, right. It wasn't that. It was, it's the formation of a diamond, right? It was pressure and time and intense pressure and time, right? And I love the word, and I intentionally use the word formation because we're all a work under progress. We always will be. You never arrive. And the moment you think you've arrived, you'll start sliding backwards. Right.
Yeah.
So when I focus on that, it really was more about formation over success. That was literally the transformation of my personality and my wants and needs. Was that what success meant to me? My big hook earlier in my life was possessions, material objects. Those were the things that I absolutely felt like I had to have and stack them on top of each other to define who I was. And the world needed to see those things to know that I needed all of that. Right. But as you push that pendulum away from that side to the other side, you have to ask yourself, well, what is on the other side? If you're moving away from exterior things that define you as a success, and that's a requirement, then to push that pendulum to the other side, what's over there? And you could argue it's air is over there. And that air happens to be the space that you occupy as a human being, because that's what's on the other side, is the real you versus the fake you on the success side. So that's the formation part. The formation is building the real you, the person you were always meant to be, not the one the world is telling you and the possessions are defining you. That's how I unpack those two equations, is moving from one to the other. And that's the transformation, honestly, that I've made in my life. And that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in my life, is I don't need that stuff anymore.
I love it, man. I really do, because I grew up, my dad was a mechanic for General Motors, and my mom took care of us kids. And it was just sort of grew up in the Midwest, and Protestant work ethic, all that sort of stuff. And it was a great way to grow up, but we didn't have much money. And, and whatever, it is what it is. I don't blame, I don't look back and say, oh, I would, like, who cares? That's what I was born into. And it was completely cool. And so, but as a consequence of that, after I got sober and got into recovery, I was like, you know what? I want to see what it feels like to have some money and buy some stuff and have some stuff. And I did that. And it was way less than fulfilling. Like, once you get into that stuff and you have it, or have some of it, or get something, it's kind of like, well, and then the question is, who did I become in that process? And that's the formation that you're talking about. And that is the nature of everything that I talk about these days, because that is what shapes. And like you said, it doesn't end. I'm being shaped from now until they're kicking dirt in my face or whatever happens at the end. And I love that being shaped part, because that's the substance.
That is the substance. And that's really what's so special about it, is the recognition that you are being shaped, that you are being formed. When you become a willing participant to that, that's a beautiful thing. And especially the willing participant, that, the title of my book that just launched is Wake Up to Die Again. And depending on where you are in your life right now, you're going to read that two different ways. There is a group of people, and it's most people, and you've been there in your life, and I've been there in my life, where I woke up every day just to die again all over. Right? And some people are there, or they're giving a little bit of themselves away every day, and they're just, waking up to die again. But on the formation side, it's a gift to yourself to wake up every day and to die again, because that dying again, that rebirth, if you will, it means you're willing to participate in the process of getting rid of or shedding the things that no longer serve you anymore, so you can move forward. There's certain things in your life that were never meant to go with you.
There are certain things in life that, and I'm a big fan, and thank you for saying that, because I'm a big fan of taking the garbage out, and I need to take the garbage out. And I don't mean this in a disparaging fashion to anyone on the planet, but sometimes that includes toxic humans.
Oh,
right. Sometimes that includes removing toxic humans from my life. But it can also be, outdated belief systems.
Sure.
Right. I mean, that's something that I had to take a look at in my life and say, what's working and what's not.
I literally say this in my book, and I've got a lot of questions from my editor about this, but I literally say, I describe a lot of events in my life, and that there was a conclusion that I came to. And the conclusion, it was time for me to call the herd. That's exactly what I said. Call the herd, right? Which is a ranching term for segregating out cattle from another. And the editor took issue with that. Are you sure you want to say that? It's so harsh. It's this. I was like, no, that's exactly what I mean. And that is exactly what I'm going to say to whoever reads my book, because it is unquestionable that throughout life, there are people that you're going to have to, well, either A, you're going to have to make a decision to move a different direction, or B, you're going to do what I did and maybe you did. Is when I started doing some of the things that were going to allow me to become a columnist, to become an Ironman, to be a patented inventor. When I started doing those things, there was a change in elevation, Daryl. And as I began to change that elevation, people started saying, where do you think you're going? Okay. And the comments came out, you're not better than us. All this stuff started coming out. And eventually I had to say, this has nothing to do with you. So I don't even know why you're talking to me about this. This is about me getting better. As a matter of fact, maybe you're not supposed to be on this journey with me. Your path is yours and mine is mine. And it was a difficult thing to say, but I was trying to be honest about the situation. But those are very, very important words that more people need to hear about. And I don't know who was the famous Jim Brown or somebody that said, show me the 5 people you hang out with, and I'll show you your life path, or something along those lines. And I can't say it like he did, but it's true.
100% true. Yeah. And I think that's something, I look at living from the perspective of conscious and intentional or not. Right. And so what am I doing consciously and intentionally to move myself? And I like to call it, a northerly direction. I'm never going to hit true north, but you know what? I'm sure going to try and do the best I can to do that. And some people, and for me, that included family members of mine that were none too excited about it. You know, now they wanted to reap some of the benefits of it over the course of time, but they wouldn't engage in it themselves. And so, and that's okay. Everybody is where they are. I would love it if everybody decided that they were going to choose a path and just go and which is what I did. And it sounds like exactly what you did, right? You just go, whatever happens, you deal with it, you learn, you move on, and you form.
Yeah. My very first invention was an invention I came up with in the military. It didn't do anything. And to fast forward through the whole story, there was a point, and it was near the end, where this was my last shot. And a bank president was willing to give me a loan for $7,000. I had $3,000 to invest in this company to help me. And everybody in the world, including my family, graciously tried to convince me to not spend the money. And I'll never forget, my dad was the last best shot that the family had to convince me to not do this. And he never told me not to do it, but he gave me every reason to not do it. He was one step short of don't do it. Right. And I'll never, ever forget, it changed me. This is a moment that changed me when I said to him, Dad, I just need you to understand that I'm scared to death of losing $10,000, but I'm more scared of never doing this and wondering for the rest of my life what could have been. And I wish more people would take that attitude. I'm more scared of what I'm going to regret by not doing this. That would be a gift most people could give themselves.
100%. And it reminds me of one of the things that you said, and I think it was about this particular, that first invention on your website, or maybe that was actually when you were 13, and I think you were selling rocks.
Yeah, I thought that was a funny story. I actually tried to sell rocks and put it to my neighbors. That lasted all of a day,
Yeah, but it was your first entrepreneurial journey, right?
It was. I had to convince my friend to go with me. He thought it was the dumbest idea in the world. I was like, no, it's not. Watch, we're going to make money and you're going to be wrong.
I love it, man. Because you said you learned early, and this is absolutely crucial, that rejection, resilience, and risk would be lifelong companions. And you said, I did not know it then, but that boy was already being trained by failure.
Yes, sir. 1,000%, my friend.
Yeah. I mean, that is some wonderful insight, right? I mean, we start to figure that out as we get older, but this goes into risk taking, right? This goes into putting ourselves in a position to fail. which I think is absolutely crucial to that formation and building ourselves in a way that's meaningful.
You know, a guy said to me the other day, I'd never thought about this. He said the only culture that he's aware of that immerses itself in failure, the culture of failure, is weightlifters and their muscles. I mean, I'm sure there's other examples, but that one he related to. He said weightlifters embrace failure because it's the failure of the muscle that gains the strength and the size that they need. So they embrace failure. And I'd never thought about that before because I go to the gym and lift weights, but I never put it in that perspective. And it's forever changed the way, even that little nuance, right, is wow, if it works for the muscle, is it not also true that would work for the mind?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's, not to get too crazy philosophical, but it's kind of a Taoist philosophy, right? Like if we move along the way nature moves along and those, the sort of the ways that we're taught and the way things are presented and the way things are, cyclical and all that sort of stuff, it mirrors nature. And I think breaking ourselves down and then building ourselves up stronger is absolutely a part of that thought process.
It does. And you mentioned this early in the podcast, what I loved it when you said it, which was being involved in the process. There's so many people that wake up every day that they're honest to God, they're just leaves blowing in the wind, man, to and fro, here and there. And they think they're living the life. I don't stress about anything. I'm like, all right, man, when lightning strikes, you give me a call. I'll be here for you,
Right. Yeah. Speaking of lightning striking, I'll shift gears a little bit because I know you have a wonderful story that has to do with showing up. And the question is, tell us about an event or a time in your life that caused you to show up for your life in a different way.
Yeah. And again, I appreciate that question. I know you like to ask that question. I appreciate that question because showing up, and I don't have to tell you this, showing up is, I think, more than 50% of the battle, right? And the example I want to use today for the audience was, I want to go back just a few years ago, actually. What has it been, 6-7 years now, that when COVID was going on? My COVID experience was not bad. My wife was off from teaching. I was working from home for a few months. I don't know, 4 months or so, 5 months. I've lost track. And everything was fun. Kids were healthy. Everything was fun. Meeting my neighbors, spending time with the neighbors. But this little voice came in my head. And that voice came out of nowhere. And it basically was, Scott, you're not where you're supposed to be. I don't know where it came from. It kind of freaked me out, to be honest with you, because everything was fine. But it wouldn't go away, Daryl. You're not where you're supposed to be. So I started wrestling with that. What are you talking about? What do you mean? And it just got louder and louder as the days went by. And the long and short of that is what I ended up deducing for myself was that it really wasn't about that I wasn't where I was supposed to be as much as it was what was the undertow in my life right there was all these broken promises to myself that I started thinking about in my life. A lot of broken promises. And one of those broken promises, one of many, was that I had promised myself for many, many years that I was going to do an Ironman, a full Ironman. And I had all the excuses of kids and time and whatever. I had all the excuses and I never did it. Same thing. I promised myself I was going to write a book. That was important to me. Right. So 2 things about showing up. In order to do an Ironman, I had to wrestle with learning to retrust myself. If you break enough promises with yourself, you're going to not trust yourself, and you're going to refuse to show up for yourself because you don't trust yourself anymore. So one of the people that I had to work on first was getting right with myself. I had to go through a realignment, and so the first show up example was my willingness to show up for myself after identifying some broken promises in my life and then doing some things, changing some behaviors so that I could learn to trust myself again. And so showing up, I know we always talk about other people. I'm going to give you another person example, but I tell people all the time, if your life is out of order, Stop looking for other stuff to fill that hole. Stop looking for additions. Show up for yourself. Look at some subtractions. So the second example is when I started showing up for myself through the Ironman, it started to change me as a human being. I think I told you that before, is that when, that whole process literally changed me as a human being. And so as I got deeper into that, months and months and months into that, the things I started noticing is that as I was sacrificing myself to get prepared for this Ironman, I began having a desire to show up for other people more out of being, generosity or gratitude or thankfulness. Those things started to surface because I was showing up for myself. The more I showed up for myself, the more of those things were coming to the surface, and that outpouring affected my family, my wife, my son, my daughter. Dad's different because he's doing an Ironman. Go Dad, right? And that was, so showing up for myself created this wellspring, Daryl, of being able to show up for other people, but it was in reverse. It didn't start with going out first. It started with going in first. And then that produced, if you will, a wellspring of gratitude and thankfulness for other people. It allowed me to show up for them. I hope that example makes sense.
Loved it. Absolutely loved it, Scott. Really, like that just connects with me so perfectly because we can't give away something that we haven't already developed in ourselves.
It's not there.
No, it's just not there. And when you talked about that life was speaking to you, or that there was a voice saying, dude, time to get going. You're missing some stuff, and
time to check in.
And those are just weights, right? Those are like weights all over my body, and they're holding me down and they're holding me back. And as I start knocking those things off the list, right? The Ironman and the book and, all of these things, and you've done tons of stuff. You've probably forgotten more stuff than a lot of people have done, but those weights start to come off.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that for myself, even now, like I'm embarking on, another journey, which has to do with sales training and being better as a human, so that I can withstand the difficulties of selling, as opposed to, go make 50 calls a day kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's scary as hell. Like there's times when I'm like, holy shit, man, I don't want to do this.
Well, you also have that voice in your head saying, hey man, nobody wants to listen to you.
Right.
Yeah, we all have that voice, and we have to turn it. Yeah. Yep. And it's not true, is that you do have a gift to share with others. When I finished the Ironman, it wasn't too long after that. I mean, it was months, but it was months later when that voice came back and said, knock, knock. Okay, you fixed that broken promises. What's the next one on the list? What's the next big hairy monster that you promised yourself? And I said, it's the book. And so, 2 years later, she's published and number one new release, number 2 on the bestsellers list. And boy, I'm glad I didn't listen to that voice and continue to break that promise.
Yeah, congratulations on that, man. That's a beautiful journey in itself, right? Getting the books written, published.
Again, another event, dude, that changed me as a human being, just going through that 2-year process, man. You can't undo what you learn from that. You can't.
Right. It becomes part of the mechanism, and it's a wonderful thing, and ways that you cannot currently imagine is how you're changed, right?
No, and that's the beautiful thing about change is, and for your listeners, whatever it is you think you're going to get or gain, or how you're going to change, right? If you do X, whatever it is, I just want to tell you, as a matter of fact, you pick the best thing you can imagine. And I'm going to tell you 2 things. You're going to be wrong, and it's going to be better. Okay?
Right.
Because you can't imagine what it is on the other side. You can't imagine it. And again, you'll get some of those things along the way, but when you change inside out, man, it's a special place to be. And you know that, Daryl.
100%. And I'm so grateful for it. And you brought up gratitude earlier, Scott, and gratitude is my fuel, man. It is absolutely, it's in my tank.
Yep.
And I practice it every day.
Yep.
But it's also in the mechanism.
Yeah.
It's just sometimes I'm just like, oh man, like I am just so grateful. Somebody said to me on a podcast, actually yesterday, I was a guest on a podcast, and they said, well, you've done what X, Y, and Z, and kind of like implying like, oh, I should be proud. I'm like, I'm not proud. I'm just grateful.
Yep.
I'm truly grateful that, I was allowed to do this work, and I got up every day and I did the work. But man, I did not know, like you said, I did not know what the gifts would be, and they're more than I could have ever imagined.
For little over 11 months, there was not a day over 11 months that I didn't ask myself, Scott, how are you going to feel when you cross the Ironman finish line? Every day. And I came up with every known answer to mankind of how I was possibly going to feel, or options. And none of them were right. And I had to walk the last 7 miles because my knee was about to explode. And except for the last 200 yards, when I turned the corner and I heard the music and I saw the finish line and I heard Mike Riley, the voice of Ironman, I literally said to myself out loud, you're going to have to shut up for just a minute because I'm running to the finish line. And it was ugly, but I jogged the last 200 yards to the finish line. You know what I mean? But anyway, I say that I crossed the finish line. And the second I crossed the finish line, I had this heavenly, overwhelming feeling of thankfulness and gratitude. And my daughter and my wife were there, and they kept saying, I kept bending over to catch my breath, and they would look at my face to make sure I was okay. And they kept saying, are you okay? And all I could say to this, I am so thankful, but my knee really hurts. And then we would walk another 100 yards and I would stop and they'd say, are you okay? Are you okay? I'm so thankful, but my knee really hurts. That's all I could tell them, man. That's all I knew to say, dude. That was all I had.
Oh, I love it. I love it, man. Yeah. And congratulations on that as well. Cause that's just, that kind of stuff is, like you said, you can't take it away. You can't remove it.
Nope.
You did the work, you accomplished that. It's built into the mechanism now. And, what a beautiful thing.
My coach said, I don't know, 7-8 months into it, she said, do you know what I love about the Ironman, Scott, more than anything? I said, no, tell me, what wisdom do you speak, wise coach? She said, you won't guess it. But what I love about it is that you can't buy it. You can't fake it. You can't have somebody else do it for you. Right. She just listed all these things. She says, it's you. You're the only one. You know what I mean? And that is such a beautiful thing in life when you're willing to commit to the work. What did you say earlier? When you're willing to do the work and get involved with yourself, it will take you to places that you dream about.
Joseph Campbell talks about, the sort of getting in the groove of life, right? He calls it follow your bliss. And I love that he talks about that. And he says, when you get in that groove in life, there's sort of a natural progression. And I have felt for a long time that I'm being led.
Yeah.
And I just have to keep my head down, keep doing the work, keep trying, and those are the prerequisites that I have to do. But the path keeps being laid out in front of me, and it's the coolest thing.
Yeah, two things on that. I write about that in the book, and I write about it though. I write about it from a different perspective. The perspective I write from is to the audience that's waking up to die again a little bit every day. They don't know, they're not in the groove that they're in is a grave. Okay, it just has the ends kicked out. You follow me?
Yes, I do.
So there are just people that there is not in the mechanism, right? Not yet. And so part of my discussion with them is in this particular case, the groove that they're in is not a groove, it's a rut, if I can use that word, right?
Absolutely.
And they need to get out of the rut because that groove is taking them it's just something they just feel trapped in.
Yeah. So
that's a different group. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, we used to talk about that when I was early in recovery and getting my head together and all that sort of thing. They said, well, don't try not to get in a rut. And they're like, a rut is a grave with both ends kicked out.
Oh, well, there you go. So you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and 100%, man. Yeah, absolutely.
But
You know,
conversely, it's worth saying this as well, because you allude to this, but I want to affirm this. There is a way out of that. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, is to talk to that group of people. And when you get out of it, it requires another set of skills. Okay. It's a skill to stay in a rut, believe it or not. It's another set to get out of it and maintain life. And so you don't have to have all the answers. But and this is the phrase I use in the book, and I talk in detail about this. If you're willing to walk the way will appear. Right. You basically said that 2 minutes ago, right? About things unfolding before you. And the way I say that is just a little differently in the book, is you have to be willing to walk the way. The way is the right way, whatever that is, laid out in front of you. Walk that way, and the tools and the skills and the people, the things will come eventually, but you got to be able to walk that way for the way to appear.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we all have, and it can be developed further over time, but we all have a resonance inside of us where we know when we're on the path that we're
100%.
designed to be on.
100%.
And we know when we're not on the path.
Yeah.
And that's that rut, but 100%. And we've alluded to it a couple of times, but we haven't talked about it. We talked about it a little bit before we got going, but the word certainty, and I don't think that many people don't necessarily think of things in these terms, but certainty and having to do with not knowing. And please spend a couple minutes on that, Scott, because that is so crucial for people to understand.
Certainly. I actually published the newspaper I write for is called the Noonan Times-Herald, and that's an award-winning newspaper. I just published an article on this, and the title of the article was "The Numbness of Certainty." That was the title. And the what I've learned is the more certain I am or I feel, the more likely it is that I'm potentially wrong. Okay. Some of the things that we feel certain about, they stop the learning. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to say this. My parents had given, when I was a kid, my parents had given me permission to watch a movie that was coming out on NBC called King Kong. Okay. And we had a babysitter there, and she came in and told me, "You're not watching that stuff in this house." I said, "Oh, yes, I am. My parents told me I could watch this." She said, "No, you're not." She went to turn the TV off, and this little episode ensued, and I had some bad behavior, right? I was throwing D batteries at her, locking the door out. I mean, I went berserk because I had permission. I had certainty. That's what my parents gave me. When they said, "You can watch this movie while we're out eating dinner with the babysitter," that gave me permission. Now I chose unwisely with that permission. And that's the power that can be the power of certainty, of wrecking your life, right? What are you so certain about? What is it that is driving that certainty? Because it may be built entirely on a false narrative, on a false belief system, a false description. And so that's the thing that I talk about when it comes to certainty. Is certainty can be a good thing, but certainty will often lead you to a place you don't expect to be. And you better be darn sure it's not based on some misinformation, or it's a guarantee it's going to lead you where you're not supposed to be.
Yeah, 100%. And another aspect of certainty for me is that the more I've been open to new information, new belief systems, new ways of looking at things, and the more I'm open to that, the more my life moves forward in a very natural and powerful way.
Yeah. Certainty cuts off learning.
Yeah, the more that I'm hung up, and I look at certainty as something in here, not to be confused with knowing, which is something that is in here.
I love that example.
That doesn't have to do with anything other than I don't have to prove it to anybody. I don't have to tell anybody. I don't have to convince anybody. I don't even have to convince myself. It's just here.
It is.
And that's where the knowing is. And the certainty is, like you said, it just leads to trouble.
Yeah, it leads to trouble. And, you can spend a lifetime being certain and proving to everybody you're right. And you get older and realize nobody cared.
Right. Tough realization, man. Tough realization, but
Especially
so
when you learn it
true.
later in life.
So true. And you know, we certainly all know people that are very certain about their stuff. And I tell them, look, everything that you're certain about, I can look up on Google, and the only thing it's going to do for me is make me good at trivia. That's it. It's not going to change lives. You know, it's not going to change lives. It's in general, normally it's just information.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting when we cross paths with people who they don't use the word certainty, but they're certain about everything. They never use the word, but you know who they are because they will tell you everything that you never asked about. All right. And it's again, I'm just being honest. It's painful for me to participate in those conversations because I can't. You relate to what I'm talking about then.
I'm with you, man. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's not about, and I'm just sort of formulating this as we go, because you know when somebody's coming from here as opposed to coming from here toward you with whatever they're imparting. And
to come from here requires transparency, vulnerability, authenticity. That's the only thing that can come from here.
Honesty. Yeah.
Yeah. And when people speak from those platforms, we gravitate to them because they're real. But I'm repulsed by the heady thinkers that want to tell me all the things that they know, or they study this person's life and here's what I should think about it. And I just cannot wire my brain to be that way.
No. And the longer you live from here, the less this whole thing. I mean, it's fun. You know, I can pack a whole lot of stuff in there, but it's not as important as the stuff that's in here.
No.
Because in here is life and everything that contributes to life for me. So, you know, Scott, we've been cranking along here, and I want to give you enough time to talk, you know, about what you do, what you offer, where to find you, about your new book, you know, as much time as you need to get us that information.
Thank you very much, Daryl. It's actually very short. And, you know, the way I found you was doing exactly about some of the things we talked about today. Is I went out in the world looking for someone that was speaking honestly, transparently, honestly about these topics we've been talking about. Found you, you know, watched some of the podcasts, right? Made me smile. I said, and again, this is a guy talking in authenticity from his heart. And that's why I reached out to you. And you know, so we could have this conversation today. Because I say that because this is what I think we need more of around the world. That's one of the reasons I wrote my book, Wake Up to Die Again. Okay. One of the reasons. There are several. You have to read the book to find out the others. But it's on Amazon.com, and it's been out for about, 11 days now, 10 days. And it reached at its peak, #1 new release and #2 on the bestsellers list. And it's receded a little bit from that, but as these podcasts come out, I think it's going to move the needle, you know, even more. But I share that with the audience, not because I want you to buy a book. I don't care if you buy a book. I don't care if you borrow. I don't care if you go to the library and get it. What I care about is the lessons, the lived lessons that are in that book that I hope will help you have a better conversation with yourself. I really hope that. Don't talk to yourself. Everybody's talking. We need more conversations. Daryl and I had a great conversation today. And the more conversations we start having with each other through the format of podcasts, through reading of books, being authentic, the more of that stuff, that's when we form a new relationship with ourselves. We start achieving things that we didn't think were possible before. That's how new relationships are repaired with our family or our kids or neighbors, or, you know, that's the kind of stuff that inspires me. That's what I'm working on today, is how can I get on a stage? How can I go get on a podcast? How can I write a book? How can I communicate with people to have a conversation that hopefully challenges something inside themselves to be a better version today than they were yesterday? And if we can do that together, again, through this format and many others, then in some way, we're going to make an individual's life hopefully better, or help them move in the direction that they need to move. And that's a win for us, Daryl.
Huge. Yeah, absolutely, Scott. You know, one of the things that I tell people, and I believe this to be true, is a lot of people aren't, and I wasn't when I was younger. I was not introduced to the information that told me that I could do whatever the hell I wanted to do with
Yep.
my life and
Yep.
with my
Yep.
inside in particular. And I could go to these places that are just beautiful and feel so perfect and wonderful and grateful and thankful and all those sorts of things. I didn't know that existed. So,
Right.
so the more we can impart that to people that it does exist and plant that little seed of, you know what, it's possible for you too. We're doing our job.
I couldn't have said it better, sir. And thank you for letting me have this conversation with you. And hopefully there's a listener that pulls something out of this that does give them a change that they're looking for.
Oh, I'm sure, man. And thank you for all of your wisdom, and thank you for finding my podcast. I really appreciate that. And we just found out that we don't live that far away from each other. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to order your book on Kindle as soon as I get off the podcast. But I'm also going to ask that, maybe you and I can sign books for each other and get them into each other.
That's, if you've written a book, that's happening, because I am a big reader. And if you've written a book, I would love to meet you in Atlanta somewhere, and maybe we'll just have dinner together. So that way we're not rushed around, and we'll do the book exchange in a New York second.
That'd be cool. Yeah, it'd be really cool. Hang out for a minute and we'll get that figured out.
You got to do it.
Scott, thank you for reaching out and doing that work and finding me. And I've really enjoyed our conversation, and very powerful. And again, thank you for your service and everything that you're doing for humanity, honestly.
No, I appreciate it, Daryl. I guess one last thing, if a lot of my published work is also on my website, it's scottlackey.com. And, all the social media is there. The podcasts are there. The published work in the newspaper that I'm getting a lot of positive DMs and feedback on. So if you're looking for more topics that dig deeper into these subject matters, and you don't read the book, you can look at some of these for free, on my website. So that would be great as well. But let Daryl and I know if you enjoyed today.
Sounds great, Scott. Thanks so much. And we'll have all the information in the show notes so people can jump to your information quickly.
That's awesome, Daryl. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for joining us on the Show Up podcast. To learn more about me, my coaching, or my books, please feel free to visit my website, daryldittmer.com. DarylDittmer.com. Thank you.